Okay, so my first question would be, what did you major in for undergraduate degree, like for your undergraduate degree, and what made you decide to select that major?
Do you want to kick it off, Elizabeth, or should I?
Oh yeah, you can if you want. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, great. I majored in English with a concentration in creative writing and economics. Why did I decide to do that? I really gravitated towards English. I like to read and write. Creative writing was just like a hobby, something that was fun for me. And then economics was, I kind of like wanted my undergrad education to feel well-rounded for me. Economics was something that challenged me. I thought it was an interesting way of thinking about the world. So I kind of combined the two.
Great. Elizabeth, what did you major in?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I have kind of a similar situation as Adele. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Adiel.
Adiel, sorry, Adiel. So I also have a liberal arts background. In my undergrad degree, I have a BFA in acting in theater. So that was like my childhood dream, was to be an actor and move to New York and do theater. And similar to what she just mentioned about having like this well-rounded education, I thought by having liberal arts, you know, that would just give me that well-rounded education. But then, you know, as the years went along, you know, you just realize that the liberal arts education and the careers that are associated with it, it's not what's going to pay the bills and go beyond that and to be high in demand and things like that. So which I'm sure we'll get into later on.
So with your selected majors, and Elizabeth, I'm completely coming off track now. Where did you come from?
You mean like what state or?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I'm originally from the South. I'm from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I grew up down there. I went to school in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, you know, and so yeah, but I slowly made the trek up to New York. So coming from a small town, I first moved to DC, you know, to do that thing for a few years. And then I moved to New York, and then, so here I am.
Okay, very cool. So for both of you, do you feel like your undergraduate majors prepared you for the careers that you entered? And what drawbacks could you specifically identify from choosing your selected major?
I would say it did prepare me. The thing about an English major, I mean, creative writing, maybe not, but I took like a ton of English classes. Like I think I took way more than what the requirement was. So I think it enabled me to be a good communicator verbally and written, which is just a skill that is appreciated across the board, right? You need to send emails to communicate. You need to be in meetings. You need to be able to articulate yourself well in the business world. And economics, I think, was helpful. I could get into it. I guess we'll get into it later. I think that's probably what got me my first job, which was in accounting, which I kind of later decided wasn't for me, but definitely because I had that kind of numerical background on my resume, I'm pretty sure that's how I was able to kind of get into that for my first job.
Got it. And Elizabeth?
Yeah, so with me, coming out of undergrad with a BFA in theater, the job opportunities were slim to none. So I pretty much just fell into hospitality. You know, on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, there's a lot of casinos. It's like a big market for hospitality. And given being in theater, you know, you're working in an ensemble. Generally, people in theater like working with other people. You know, we like figuring out how other people live, like working with people of different cultures, backgrounds, ethnicities, that sort of thing. So it just kind of like was a natural thing for me to get into. And it was super helpful. I mean, I kind of took my experience in hospitality and moved to DC, realized I did not want to work and juggle 3 different serving jobs while trying to audition. That's really how I got into the hotel industry in DC. And then subsequently in New York, working at the Plaza for a few years. All of that helped. I feel like people in theater are really adaptable, very creative, very outside the box thinkers. I noticed Eris is on this call. We chatted when we first came into the program about, hi, Eris. Eris also has a creative background, and we talked about kind of like the competitive advantage of people who come from a liberal arts background. You think outside the box, you bring something different to the table, and that's what helped me in hospitality, and that's what's currently helped me in the industry I'm in now.
I think having the ability to think on your feet is a really, really huge talent, because you get thrown into situations left and right in your work environment, and not knowing how to react to it properly can be extremely detrimental. I noticed that our third panelist, Jack, was able to join us. Jack, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Sorry if my internet's a little shoddy where I am right now. I've been having a bit of a hectic day, but I'm good. Happy to be here.
Yes, we're glad to have you. So we were just discussing our majors in college and whether or not they provided us with any benefits. So Jack, what did you major in undergrad?
So, like Elizabeth, I was in hospitality before this. So I graduated from the New School here in New York with a bachelor's in food studies. So effectively liberal arts with kind of a lens towards food. All of our history classes were like history of food in New York, and our science-based courses were food science. It had everything, just basically put food in front of it, called it a day. It was a good experience. It was interesting. I would not say that it helped me at all in my career. However, my career took a couple of different turns. So before that, I actually went to culinary school, and studied and became a chef. So I was a chef for about 7-8 years, before going back to Baruch and getting my MBA, and now finally landing in venture capital. So weird change. But as far as my experience in undergrad helping, I think it was really, I worked during school, and so what helped me more than the education itself was largely the network I had, the connections I made outside of school, and the work I did on a personal level and on a kind of outside the classroom level, and that has run true through my MBA as well. I certainly would not say that I'm like coming into work every day, even in finance, and looking at balance sheets the way that I was like taught to at Baruch necessarily. It's really about how I was able to kind of build a network and build a more of a soft skill set outside of the classroom. And you learn those hard skills on the job. At least that's my experience has been for the most part.
Okay. So that is actually a great segue, because my next question is obviously deciding to get your MBA is a huge commitment, a huge time commitment, energy, the whole nine. And we're not even going to talk about financial, because the Pell Grant disappears when you start working towards that secondary degree. But I'd like to know what made you three decide that it was time for you to get an MBA? Like, what was the motivation behind deciding to take the leap and actually start working towards that?
Who are you asking?
Oh,
I'm asking whoever wants to answer. But since you spoke, Jack, you're on the hot mic.
Got it. So I would characterize my decision in two different ways, one positive and one somewhat negative. And the negative one is something you don't always want to talk about in like job interviews or anything like that. It's not something you hear too much because everyone wants to paint a great picture of themselves, but it's realistic. So to start with the positive reason, I really wanted to challenge myself in a different way. I had, because, I was in kitchens as a chef. I was working a very kind of a craft job, right? It was service industry. It's a crafts. It's a skill. It's like a hard skill. It's not an art. It's not a thinking person's job. It is a craft. And so there's many great things about that, but I wanted a little bit more impact on the businesses I was working for, to eventually, maybe even run my own business and just kind of get an understanding of what else was out there. There were very few opportunities for me to ever be inside. I mean, even like physically in an office, for years of my life. And I had no idea what that looked like. I had no idea what jobs looked like. So I wanted a different kind of challenge, a different way of thinking. And I certainly got that. The negative kind of reasons, if you want to call it that, were I was in a toxic environment in kitchens before my MBA. I worked at a restaurant in New York, which while I was there was named the #1 restaurant in the entire world. And that comes with it some significant, pressure and challenges. And I was getting yelled at on a daily basis for smiling, like screamed at the top of their lungs, screaming at me for smiling. And that was just not something I could sustain. And I was also making minimum wage doing that. So it was all this prestige, all this challenge, all this hard work. And it really amounted to a toxic work environment and no reward financially or, emotionally. And so I needed a change. And Baruch was one of the options I had. I knew I wanted to go back to school because I would have pigeonholed myself a little bit in that industry if I didn't make a drastic change through school. And so I was really between Baruch and Cornell, believe it or not. It was either the Cornell Masters of Hospitality Management or Baruch's MBA. No, it's not Danielle. It was 11 Madison Park. And so I chose Baruch because I wanted to kind of move away from the hospitality world. Hope that answers it.
No, that definitely does. Adiel, if you would like to chime in.
Yeah, happy to jump in here. So I kind of alluded to it earlier, but it was a very stressful time for me, like trying to find a job out of undergrad. And I feel like I was really pressured into graduating and having that job just lined up. So I got basically like 2 job offers. One of them paid significantly less and one of them paid a little better. And I just kind of took it, and it started 10 days after my undergrad graduation. So I pretty much like jumped right in without much of a break between the two. And that job was in accounting. And kind of right away, I realized like this isn't for me, but I decided to kind of give it a try for a year or two. While I was there, I noticed that a bunch of people that were pretty senior in my company either had gotten MBAs or were pursuing them part-time in the evening. And I thought to myself, oh, this is something that sounds like I would want to do. Like, I think that would be great for the next step in my career. Maybe it could help me pivot. I'm not sure. So during that first job, I decided to study for the GRE. At the time, I thought maybe I'd get like some kind of master's, but then similar to Jack, I thought an MBA would give me that broader experience and network. And I felt like MBA kind of meant more than like whatever master's I might decide to get, which would then pigeonhole me to a specific industry. So started to study. That job was also like a bit of a toxic work environment. So I kind of just had to get out ASAP. And unfortunately, my option was to do the same thing, which I already knew that I didn't like. So that was kind of just unfortunate timing. But at the end of the day, I found it very challenging to advance in my career and even to pivot at this second company that I was at, even like without getting my MBA. And then once I told them I was getting it, I was trying to apply internally and nothing was happening. So it was just really something that I felt like I needed to do in order to advance professionally and get out of accounting and do something else that I wanted to do more.
Thank you for sharing, ADL. That is just disheartening. Elizabeth, what made you decide that you wanted to go back to school and seek higher learning?
Yeah, so I have sort of a similar theme to Jack and even to Adiel. And it's interesting because Jack and I come from hospitality. I worked in hotels, restaurants, casino environments, the whole 9 yards. So I get what you're saying about the environment. For me, so just coming from a theater background, going into hospitality and then working in the hotel industry, I had no business background or even hospitality management. So everything I learned on the job, and I had a lot of hustle and a lot of grit. I wanted to learn. I learned different systems, everything with hotels. But what I realized in my 6 years working for Fairmont, who they manage the plaza, is I realized that the old story we hear of if you work hard enough, you'll make it just isn't true. It's not true at all. I mean, it can be true, but more often than not, things can get in the way. Like for my instance, specifically, when I worked at the plaza, I hustled, I did a lot of stuff that I thought would allow me to get promoted, learn more. But at the end of the day, I was seen as like a coordinator, as basically a gopher, like go for this, do that. In the hotel industry, you wear a million different hats, you work so hard, but at the end of the day, can be very tricky to get promoted. And by the time the pandemic came along, luckily I had already started the MBA program, but with getting laid off, I realized, and I'm going to be quite frank with you all, I really had no skills whatsoever. I had no Excel skills. I had no PowerPoint skills. Yes, I messed around with some budgets and I really tried to learn piecemeal with accounting on, how to manage a sales and marketing expense budget. And I kind of blew up my experience a little bit. But other than that, it was pretty scary. I had zero. I really was at ground zero. Like it really felt like between undergrad and the age of like 31, it felt like I had done nothing with my life, just to be blunt. And kind of rewinding a little bit, in summer of 2019, I kind of had like a mentor friend in my life to where I would sit with him behind Trump Tower in the public space, like every weekend. And he basically just told me, Elizabeth, you got a degree in finger painting. Like you need to stop playing around in the hotel and you need to move on. And he would bring me like Wall Street Journal articles every weekend. We would talk about stuff. And finally I was like, okay, I've got to make a change. And this was pre-COVID. So I, studied for the GRE, did the GMAT and all that and got into the program. And when I got in, I thought, well, let's just see what happens. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do and I don't know how this is going to end up, but hopefully I can make it through statistics. Hopefully I can make it through finance with no background and no experience. And I just went through the program, grabbing onto any experience, any professor, any insight I could get to push myself along. Because again, coming into the corporate world with really no experience or skills that really mattered, it was like, okay, I've got to, do something to change this around pretty quickly. So it's that's pretty much how that happened.
I agree with Aris. Like, thank you for sharing. I when I started Baruch, I wish I knew someone like you because I feel like we were in the same boat. I also majored in English. I majored in English lit, and prior to that, I did biology. But like, at least Adiel was smart enough to do economics because you have something to fall back on that way. But it can be super intimidating when you are starting pretty much from scratch. And I think it's pretty gutsy of you to make that change and to run at it so hard. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I wanted to add one more thing. I think Jack touched on, going through some like personal development or, like you worked on yourself too. I did a lot as well. And I'll say this, that I know the GCMC is great and, you know, everyone goes to them, but a lot of things I had to work on really didn't even involve the MBA program itself or the GCMC or anything like that. Like, I had to do a lot of work on myself personal wise, not only from transitioning industries, but I think being in the hotel industry, it was like kind of being stuck in a rut personally. Like, I felt like I had really no personal development in all of my time in the hotel industry. So it was like really important to do that personal work in order to move on. Like from 2020 to 2022, yes, I worked at AIG before now being at Fox, but some weeks I would literally spend 5 to 7 hours a week interviewing, practicing mock interviews, reading tons of books on different industries, project management, the whole 9 yards. Like, it was really like massive. And it's nothing that I think just signing up for a GCMC appointment would have helped me at all. So it was just like, it was a big journey. And I'm not even technically graduated yet. I'm graduating in May, but that's only because I'm taking a few extra classes.
No, this is still like a super important story that a lot of us need to hear. Like I said, I wish I knew you 2 years ago. So with regards to your selection of program, you have the MBA and you also have the MS. So Elizabeth, like, what made you decide to go for the MBA versus the MS?
I mean, to be honest, when I applied for Baruch, I really didn't know a lot about MS programs or what that entailed or anything like that. I just knew, okay, people get an MBA, let me apply for this degree and see if I can even get in. Like, at that point for me, it was just a matter of, can I even get into this program and can I even do the basic functional classes? I think later on in the program, I sort of wished I would have gone the MS route, because what I ended up doing, I ended up taking all of the base functional foundational MBA courses, but then I took all my electives in information systems, which was really helpful by the time I got to Fox, you know, doing the project management in the technology department, because I realized, okay, wow, this Baruch education experience really helps. And because I had such a big salary jump from AIG to Fox, I was like, okay, well, let me just take a few extra courses because the ROI on this is really great. So that's like a long-winded answer, but.
No, I appreciate the thoughtful answers, and I think everyone does. ADL, what made you decide to do the MBA versus doing the MS program?
Yeah, I guess I kind of touched on it earlier, but so just to backtrack, like I mentioned in my undergrad, I studied English. Like, I always thought that I'd be doing something in marketing, and that was kind of the same situation. Like, I kept thinking I would try to pivot to marketing. Like, I had these skills, I was applying for entry-level positions in marketing, and like no one was biting. I wasn't even getting interviews for like jobs that were 0 to 2 years of experience. I was told these are very, very competitive, or like just not even hearing back, frankly. So I was considering either like what Elizabeth was saying, an MS in information systems or some kind of MS in marketing, but I really just wanted, again, to feel like more well-rounded and have broader access. And I know usually an MBA comes with a lot more networking opportunities. So I really wanted that. And then throughout my MBA journey, similar to Elizabeth taking the classes in information systems, I took a bunch of classes in marketing. I thought marketing is what I wanted to do. I also took business analytics. At the end of the day, I kind of realized that I was more interested in marketing adjacent positions. So what I do now is more like strategic, it's analytics and consumer insights. And I feel really grateful that I didn't kind of pigeonhole myself into like any kind of master's in one particular field. Like, I feel really happy that I took the MBA. Just like little things that were probably functional about working in the corporate world, even though I worked in the corporate world before, just like a lot of my Baruch classes. Just a random example, last summer, I was an intern, and like my manager mentioned that we were looking at something in a BCG matrix, and like I wouldn't have known what that was if I had just like taken exclusively marketing classes. But then it was good to learn about that and understand about the marketing fundamentals, like the marketing funnel, and then round myself out with like that statistical knowledge, understanding what regression analysis is, understanding from the financial perspective. So I feel like going for my MBA just allowed me to take a wide variety of classes that were truthfully really applicable, which most people say the MBA is mostly about networking and less about the classes. But for me, I really think I needed to build that foundational knowledge, plus build my professional network in order to successfully pivot my career.
Perfect. Thank you. Jack,
Yes.
what
same
made you
question.
decide? Yes.
I never really considered any other program. It was, it just wasn't really on my mind. The MBA was something I had researched between Baruch and other schools as well as probably the best way to pivot at the, for someone in my position who was pivoting so drastically. So I kind of had this goal of pivoting into finance. At the time, I had no idea what that meant. So I decided to just get my MBA. And, I think there was I guess call it soft skill element, a little more of a broad education that was appealing to me rather than going so deep on a skill or anything like that. And I agree with what I'm sorry about this. Adiel or Adil?
Adiel.
Adiel. Apologies.
No
I agree with
worries.
what I agree with what Adiel said. That those foundational skills certainly helped in the MBA and in the classes I took. Corporate finance and statistics and all that kind of base layer knowledge that was very useful and necessary to for me kind of understand how I was thinking and what world I was getting into in this like broad world of finance. Super helpful. And then of course on top of that you have the network. And, I went during COVID, so my first semester was end of 2019. So did about 3/4 of it through COVID, and even with that built an incredible network. And one of them helped me get one internship, and one of them continues to help me in my current career, because we kind of send like financial deals back and forth. And it's every effect of it is super useful, but it's always what you make of it. It's never, you're never just going to sit in a class and learn. You're going to sit in a class and then try and go apply it and do it yourself and figure it out afterwards. And those people around you that are doing the same thing are great resources to rely on. Sorry, I veered away from the question a little bit, but
Yeah, all good. We appreciate all the information and experience that you're willing to share with us. So I know Adiel entered the MBA program with the idea that she was going to hone her skills and possibly land that dream marketing job, and then ended up with a marketing adjacent job that was a lot more in line with what she wanted to do. When you were working towards your MBA, as soon as you started, did you have an idea, Jack, as to where you wanted to end up?
I did, like I said, very initially, I was, I'm going to work in finance. And that was all I got. That quickly became investment banking, because that's where a lot of people start out. And I was looking at this as if I was basically a 21, 22-year-old again, restarting my entire life. What I've realized since then is that is so not the case. And it is so useful to have any experience in another industry before this. Not that I'm better necessarily than those kids coming out of great schools at 22. They're almost certainly better at the analytical side than I am. But I also understand a lot more about people now, a lot more about organizations, a lot more about working with others, a lot more about deadlines, and everything that comes with work in a broad sense. So in thinking about it like that, I was targeting investment banking because you learn these financial skills, and you look at jobs online and they all say 2 years of investment banking experience at a top tier bank. And that's where everybody hires from in finance, and those jobs pay well. And, it was all very alluring to me. I also was not scared of the hours, because in restaurants I was working arguably worse hours in a worse environment, and, making about a tenth of what these kids are making at 22. But that kind of worked out for me. I got an investment banking internship through a network effect, through someone. It's my uncle's childhood friend's kid was the way I got an investment banking internship. So in that, look everywhere, talk to everyone, use your network like beyond what you'd ever think. So I did get that experience, and it maybe helped me a little bit in my job search after college. After the MBA. But I got an interview call for some application, one of probably hundreds that I just kind of cold put in, wrote some essays for it, and it was for a venture capital internship. Because I was still looking for internships out of school, not full-time jobs. I mean, I was looking for both, but I wasn't getting any bites on like corporate jobs. I don't have the background for a corporate role. And for some reason, I got this call back, and when I talked to them, they said, "We saw your background as a chef, and that's the reason we called you for this venture capital internship." And it was not because I couldn't, do financial analysis or anything, but it's because they knew I was willing to hustle and work hard, and I knew how to deal with people. And I had, significant experience in an interesting industry, and diversity of thought's a real thing. Like, most jobs are going to hire in the most risk averse way possible. They're going to hire the top 10% of kids from Harvard if they can. And that's fine. But there are a lot of firms that really genuinely want people that have diverse backgrounds, that are unique individuals. They're not just robots. I saw a resume come across our desk while I was an intern. My boss showed it to me, and she was like, "Do you like this resume?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure he's really smart." And she goes, "Yeah, he's just so fucking boring." And it's like the same. There's a million of them. So whatever you can do to stand out is interesting to folks. And I think especially for anybody that's a career changer, leverage it. It's not all about that base level knowledge, incredibly important. Baruch is great at all of that. Focus on work, on your coursework, of course, but like put effort into leveraging your story and leveraging your uniqueness as a human, not just being better than the next person at whatever job you're doing, because there's always going to be someone better. You're never going to, okay, fine. One of you or two of you might be the best in the world at one thing. Great. I know I'm not. I'm not the best in the world at a single thing, but I'm unique. I have this interesting story, and I can kind of leverage that and tell it really well. And that took a lot of effort and time to get to. I looked back just a few weeks ago on some interview notes I had for that investment banking internship, and it was like 30 pages of financial notes, personal story notes, all these things. Like, I don't know if it actually, no, it did help. It helped kind of solidify the story. So all that is to say, I went in thinking investment banking, and I ended up in venture capital. I couldn't be happier. And it's because of the waves that I rode and the twists that I took, the turns that I took when, those opportunities presented themselves. Good to have a goal. You need a goal. Don't be afraid to pivot.
ADL, actually, Elizabeth, since you're still in the midst of your MBA, you're at the tail end. Did you have a firm idea about what you wanted to do or what you want to do when you finish?
When I got into the program, I had no idea what I was going to do or where I would end up or where this journey would take me. I just, got into the program right before COVID hit. So to me, it was still like, I was still in survival mode, to be honest. It was like, okay, I'm doing this new thing. I'm still working at the hotel. Let me see if I can survive the statistics class. Not to sound dramatic or anything, but that's the level of where I was at. So that's pretty much where my mindset was until I got into the business analytics class that Eris and I actually took at the same time. And it was in that class where the light bulb kind of went off, because the business analytics class wasn't really taught from like a hardcore technology and systems point of view. It was more like, okay, this is what it's going to be like if you're a business analyst, with requirements gathering, agile, project management. And that's where the professor basically became my mentor and effectively my sponsor, and was like, recommending me for jobs at Deloitte where he was working at. And this was like me 2 months, like a month into the class. So I was like, oh, wow, never thought this could be a possibility. Like, I never went into the program being like, oh, I wonder if I could get into Deloitte or PwC, because that just seemed like a far off thing that would never happen. So I started interviewing for that firm. And then the professor told me, look, project management is a really hot thing right now with your background in the hotel industry. It's kind of like you were a project manager almost, like you should go for it. That's not exactly what he said. I'm trying to paraphrase it, but effectively, I was inspired by him to get those certifications in project management, agile. And after I got that, my whole world just kind of blew up. Like, I was starting to get interview calls, and everything was just kind of like snowballing from there. So I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but when I got laid off, I was unemployed for like 18 months. So I was like living on unemployment, hustling and going to these classes and being like, I wonder if I can actually get a job by the time unemployment ends, so that I don't run out of money and I'm not sitting here like, oh my gosh, and getting just some random job. So I was really under a lot of pressure to hustle and make something work. So I feel like I'm going a little bit all over the place, but that's kind of how much of a roller coaster it was for me. I did eventually get a job at AIG after I couldn't get the job at Deloitte. I tried with EY, applied to AIG, got a business analyst job there, but the culture was really bad, really not good, not a good environment. So I just kept applying, like I never quit. I kept working on interviews. And then when I applied to the project manager job at Fox, I didn't get a referral. I just applied on Indeed.com, talked to the recruiter. I established a connection with her because her daughter was in theater. And I said, oh my gosh, like I was a theater major, and project management to me is like being a stage manager. And I pretty much acted my way through it, to be honest. And what's good about Fox is that they're the type of company, and I've heard this even internally already, that HR has eliminated the education and job experience requirements. So they really do look for personality. They really do look for people with grit and hustle, at least in the technology department. And I can say that's true, especially since I was able to get in and they took a chance on me. Not to say that I won't work at a Big Four in the future, because that was my initial goal after the professor became my mentor. But for now, it's really good. Like, I know we've been talking a lot about liberal arts backgrounds, and I've met quite a few people at Fox in technology who have liberal arts backgrounds. They were like a philosophy major, then they became like a software engineer. Like, there's a lot of career changers there. So it's pretty inspiring. Oh yeah, Deloitte. Yeah, it's actually interesting because Fox is about to bring Deloitte in as to consult on this massive project. So I'm like, okay, I could work with them indirectly now. But anyway, so that's my story.
We appreciate you sharing. Adiel, do you have anything that you want to add with regards to your goals while you were navigating through the MBA program?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Elizabeth, I applied to so many places, and like I said, like I wasn't getting any bites. Like something had to change. Like I did meet with the Baruch Career Center, and I was kind of given this instruction to revamp my resume to focus on like class projects as opposed to work experience, because the work experience was irrelevant. Even then, like I said, I was applying to entry-level positions and like nothing was happening. It was actually after having a conversation with a fellow Baruch MBA student that I decided to pivot and start applying for internships, which was like a huge risk for me at the time because I chose to do the part-time MBA program for financial reasons. I didn't want to give up a full-time income, and I started applying for internships, and like it kind of felt like the dominoes started falling into place. Like there was one internship that I took that was like a part-time unpaid marketing internship, and it was kind of that cemented the fact that I decided I didn't want to do marketing. I didn't like the actual marketing. I liked being marketing adjacent. I liked working with data and strategy. So from there, I applied to an MBA summer internship for last summer. Somehow, I guess it was luck, or they saw something on my resume that made me stand out. I got an interview, and it worked out for me to get the internship, and then that transformed into a full-time job. But even the internship was in analytics, media analytics, and it wasn't something I had experience in before. And then when I got the full-time job offer, they had told me, we don't know like if like you might get a job on the consumer insights team or the analytics team or the strategy team. And it was like, it could have been any of the three. So it wasn't necessarily a given that it would be analytics. And then the full-time job I have now wound up being kind of like a hybrid consumer insights and marketing analytics role. So I thought I was going to land in one place. I started working towards that. Turns out I didn't like that. And then I'm really happy with kind of how it turned out and where it landed in the end, even if it wasn't exactly what I thought I wanted to begin with.
That is definitely interesting and a fair assessment, because I feel like we sort of enter a certain space with like these extremely, if not rigid ideas, like some sort of idea about where we're going to go. And we end up 18 million miles to the left. But I think it's super important that you seem like extremely engaged in the work that you do and satisfied with what you are doing. Like you smirk a little bit when you talk about what you do for work, which is amazing, because it's just, you spend so much time at work, it makes absolutely no sense for you to be miserable there. So leaving a toxic situation and going to get your degree, amazing. And it seems like it's worked out really well for all of you. So I know you mentioned, ADL, that you are where you did the part-time MBA. I was wondering, has anyone done the full-time MBA on the panel? Jack. So there are some very, very key differences that I've noted, and like I've like gone back and forth about it, because I'm, in the same boat as Adiel. Like I had to work throughout getting my MBA, and I know you also had to work, but like my work schedule was just a hot mess. So doing the full-time program wasn't really something that I could commit to. But in speaking with the full-time MBA cohorts, like I get a little jealous, because they were able to build up such a community. They have like a group text. I, to a very large degree, feel like some of the networking availability for like the evening MBA students is not limited, but a little more difficult to attain while you're in the evening MBA program. So if you could tell us a bit more about your experience doing the full-time MBA, and Elizabeth, are you doing the part-time MBA?
Yes, I'm in the part-time one.
Okay, so Jack, if you could discuss your experience within the full-time MBA.
Yeah, for sure. I think, well, what do you want to know about it? I mean,
Well, for starters, like, why did you decide to do the full-time MBA versus the part-time MBA?
sure. I mean, listen, I was trying to make a career transition. I was not hoping to be cooking on the side, and that's not really a thing you can do anyway. Cooking is a full-time, there's no chance to get out of, there's no chance to have a part-time cooking role, at least not in the kind of environment that I was in. So there was really only full-time or bust, because I also didn't really have the skills to get other jobs. That being said, I did work during my full-time MBA, and I took some extra classes, and I was able to squeeze in some serving shifts. I was helping friends out at the restaurant. I helped my girlfriend open a restaurant during my MBA as well. So there was balls to the wall busy the whole time. And it was a ton of work, but I think what was really important is that we made time for those networking opportunities, and to make friends and develop relationships with the cohort, with the people around the cohort as well. I'm also friends with people that were not in my full-time cohort, and those network effects have been more valuable than I can really even imagine. They've become some of my lifelong friends. They've been great. We help each other professionally. And I guess my decision to do the full-time was, in a weird way, it was also a financial decision, because I wasn't losing that much by not working. So I was working as a cook, where I was not making enough to live in New York City anyway. I am lucky, in a sense. No, I'm lucky, truly lucky, that my family's here. So I had a support system. For the portion of it that I was going in person, I was living in Rockaway with my mom, so it was a 2-hour commute each way. I was commuting 4 hours a day for my classes. I was staying in to work at a restaurant sometimes at night, staying with friends and my girlfriend when we weren't living together, occasionally in the evenings. And then when COVID hit, I moved in with her, so it's Manhattan, and we were doing the same thing. So there was financial incentive to actually weirdly not focus purely on work, have a little bit of a side gig here and there. But Baruch's a really affordable school compared to the others, and it doesn't offer any less quality classes, less quality opportunities. Like, the hardest thing you're going to have to deal with is, going into job interviews, and you're up against kids from Harvard and Yale and these other, and NYU and Columbia, and they get a better first look. Doesn't mean they have a better exit. They don't have a better interview. They don't have a better experience. They're not necessarily more skilled. They just have that name on their resume. And your job is to work past that and show that you're unique, you're better. And honestly, to do that, leverage the network that you built and focus on building that network. It really freaking helps.
That's fair. So I know, like, with your job now in venture capital, you sort of interact with people that are outside of your age range. When you were working in the full-time MBA program, were there any major age discrepancies there? I know you said that you had a girlfriend or have a girlfriend.
Yeah. Within the cohort?
Within the cohort.
Yeah, there were definitely there were a fairly broad range. I think we ranged from 23 to 45 or 50, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So pretty broad range. And, a lot of it was like 27 to 32, 33. That was most of it. Not really, it didn't get in the way of anything. It was something that was, easily dealt. We didn't have to deal with it. It was like, wasn't a thing. It wasn't that important.
I think after a certain point, like the age difference doesn't really make much of a wave. I think it's more of a difficult situation when you were trying to interact with people of a different mindset. Like I don't run around asking people about their age.
No, for sure. I think that's a fair question. I think if you're serious about your career change or your search for a new role or your advancement in whatever industry you're in through school, then your whole persona is about being as professional and successful as possible, at least in those situations. And a beer with somebody greases the wheels. That's always great. That extends beyond age groups, thought processes and everything. I think that treat them like professional colleagues and friends, and there's nothing to get around.
I think I guess the age question is more related to, I guess, like hitting those the lifetime milestones, like having a wife, a child, etc. Like when you have those responsibilities, those connections, and you're pursuing a full-time program, I think the question is related to like how a full-time MBA student would be able to juggle that. I think that's where the big
that's hard. Don't within the program, not a big deal. Outside of the program, then yeah, of course, that's going to be a major consideration. I don't have children. I don't have children, so I didn't have to manage that, and that was I have the utmost admiration for people that can.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jack. AD Elizabeth, can you chime in a bit about your experience as a part-time MBA?
Yeah. You mean as far as networking opportunities, kind of offsetting what Jack talked about?
Yes, networking opportunities, support, things of that nature.
Yeah, so, living in New York City, I'm alone. I don't have family. I don't have like a support system like that. So for a long time, like even before I left Mississippi, I had that type of grit and determination to where no matter if there were a bunch of networking opportunities or nothing at all, I was going to make something work. But in the MBA program, as far as being part-time, I will admit that before I applied to the program, I thought to myself, oh, wow, like if you're in the full-time MBA program, like there's probably so much more opportunity. But then once I got in, and especially once I had the professor as the mentor for like a year and a half, my thoughts kind of changed on that, because then I thought, okay, this is really about quality over quantity. And at that point, I kind of thought, okay, this may sound controversial, but I do think networking is a little overrated. Or the focus on it at least, and that might be a controversial opinion, but I guess I kind of go about it in an indirect way. Like, I guess you could say meeting this professor that kind of changed my life and my career trajectory and just everything in general, I guess you could say that's networking, but to me, it was kind of like, you know what, I'm going to grab whatever I can by the horns and just go for it and see if it can get me somewhere. So from that point of view, I really didn't rely on networking with other students, although I've met a ton of really talented people and very smart people in the program. And then plus Baruch being so diverse and having such a great reputation, it's a great school to be at. Like a ton of employers know about the school and everything. So that's all very, very good. But I never relied on networking. I just kind of had an open mind and was like, let me just see what happens.
I hear that. ADL, do you feel like your part-time MBA choice affected your networking opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I feel like as part-time MBA students, it was, and maybe Jack can attest to whether this is true or not. Like, we kind of had to search for the opportunities more, which like I went to a large state school for undergrad, so I was kind of used to like paving my own path. But definitely, we were like on all the listservs, the opportunities were available. You just kind of had to carve out the time and find your way. And I think maybe like more independently than the full-time program, but I'm really not sure. It could be that they had all the same opportunities as us. So definitely, I feel like just being a part of the Baruch MBA program kind of like gave me some street cred. Like when I was networking to people on LinkedIn and things, like I tried to reach out to Baruch alums first when I was sending out emails, but I like sent so many messages and just saying, oh, I'm an MBA candidate at Baruch. I feel like that just like backed my name up a little bit, if that makes sense.
I would, I imagine that there were a couple of more opportunities here and there for the full-time MBA program to kind of like, I don't know, get together and reach out to other opportunities. Although it was still a lot of the same that you're describing. It was a lot of just like cold outreach. It was a lot of going through lists of people and jobs and opportunities and whatever you could get to. I guess I just found that working those as a network and as a group of people that you can build relationships with and reach out to kind of whenever for whatever has been really valuable. And in my experience, I've had 2 jobs, both kind of in the entry-level world in my whole career, both in cooking and in this new life of mine, that were not fully network based, and the rest of them were like somehow getting to another role through whoever I met, like some server I used to work with, or my most recent role, which reason I was late is because I started a new job, so things are a little crazy. And the new job is, the sister company of the company that I started with outside of just out of my MBA. So it all flows together, and I made a good impression on them. They didn't call me for a job because I suddenly was like the best venture capital business analyst there is. They called me because they really liked working with me, and they saw that I had grit and determination and a thoughtful way of approaching work. So they wanted to hire me on full time.
That's great. And one thing I will add, which you just kind of touched on, Jack, is that utilize your classmates. Like I feel like those intros that we have at the beginning of the semester are such a great opportunity to learn about what people do. Like especially in the part-time MBA program, everyone is working. And in the full-time MBA program, they have work experience. So like everyone has unique connections. So like I found that saying, oh, I want to venture into marketing like that, then I would connect with, classmates who do that, understand like how they got to where they are. And that was really helpful for me, just like hearing about their journeys.
Thank you guys for sharing, and congrats, Jack, on your new role. I just LinkedIn you, and congrats. It's amazing. I have this question, and I'm sorry, I don't know if we're in the middle of questions, and I'm sorry I joined late. I was on another call, but what would you guys do differently if you were given the opportunity now? When you first started your MBA, your networking and all this stuff, your career path. Yes.
It's a hard question to answer. I think I don't know how you 2 feel about it. I don't necessarily regret anything I did. I don't think I would do anything significantly different. I don't think I did anything wrong. But as I've kind of matured within this industry and just as a professional through the MBA program and through life and my career now, I think it is just so important to, keep up good relationships and reach out to people as much as you can and continue to. Building friendships is really significant, both personally and professionally. I love it when I get when I get messages from Baruch alums. It's like, it's cool. There's this like huge community of thousands of students who've graduated both from undergrad and graduate programs, and they're all looking to have a better life. They're all looking to work with others and be good human beings. So, you know, don't be afraid to get out there and do that more. I still want to do that more myself. Sometimes I struggle to get back to people, and that's like, that sucks. I don't want to do that, but it's always nice to see when it happens. And then the other thing is, I think working on, one thing I really wish I did was take some more time, just more of my, you know, free time or commuting time or whatever, to learn about whether it's finance, whether it's coding, whether it's, you know, any management styles, doing a little extra work beyond what is just in your courses. I've recently started just like a little coding boot camp on the side. I do it a few minutes every week basically, and it's like not much, but it's something. And all of a sudden I'm like, I understand what people are talking about when they're, you know, pitching me coding applications, and I can, maybe that's generous. I don't fully understand it, but I'm getting there, right? And these like little opportunities to build yourself up, those are always there. Take advantage of them. Baruch has access to, you know, there's a bunch of financial things like Wall Street Oasis, and there's Training the Street. They do, if you're interested in finance, they do a bunch of boot camps with them. And you know, those are really useful, really, really useful.
So just based off of your time here at Baruch, would you say that the skills you were able to obtain, like how did they translate into the real world? Were there any major gaps between your education and work experience? Obviously, if you feel comfortable, share. If not, I definitely won't pressure you one way or another. ADL, would you mind starting?
Sorry, my Zoom was cutting out. Do you mind just repeating the question?
Sure. I wanted to know how your education translated into, I guess, like real life experience, like the skills that you
Sure.
learned in the classroom. Did they translate well into the working world? Were there any gaps in your education that you feel like could have been filled differently?
Yeah, I would say for sure it translated. I would say for me, the most important classes that contributed to my getting this internship and then translated well were the business analytics course that I took, and then marketing management, which was like the intro marketing class. Like, I feel like that class covered more than just marketing. Like, it talked about pricing, it talked about the consumer funnel, a little bit about like bases concept testing, which is something that I work on now. So I felt like that was really applicable, covering like all facets of marketing. And then the business analytics course, I had zero experience in analytics, and I felt like it was really great to have that hands-on experience. We used Tableau, we used a data mining platform called RapidMiner. Those were the kinds of things that when I could speak to them in an interview, it like really stood out. And I found that like knowing how to use one of those systems could translate really well to knowing how to use other systems. So I use Tableau a little bit in my current job, but we mostly use Power BI. So like understanding the slight differences between those, like the basics of a data visualization tool, like that was really helpful. And then I did feel like I had pretty strong Excel skills before my MBA, but I took that Excel class. I think it's called like data modeling with spreadsheets or something like that. And, you know, I think it's always helpful to learn more about Excel. So like we learned Power BI, which is like a tool that can help build spreadsheets, and like, so you don't have to necessarily use formulas and things like that. And I use that like in my daily life, building spreadsheets and things like that, in my current job. And I do a lot of data visualization in Excel. And then I think actually the capstone project, my group did, we consulted a clothing company on their first pitch for funding, and kind of like getting an overview of the components that go into a funding pitch was helpful to me. And I feel like it was just like immediate, like when I started my job, all these terms that were like getting thrown around, like financial terms and things like that, that I had no idea about. Like I finally was able to understand them because we had applied them in a very concrete real world application. So I would say like those 3 classes were probably the most relevant to what I do now. And then, like I mentioned, I think that the strategy, business strategy and consulting, I think it's called that. I took the class with Kirkus. I think maybe some of you were in my class. I think Elizabeth was actually in my class, but just having the background on like certain just business jargon, honestly, and like understanding how companies functioned and like different strategies, I found was just helpful, like background knowledge to know, because I do work for a large company now. I work for a CPG company, and I just feel like learning all these things about like we have like a matrix org structure, for instance. Like I wouldn't have known what that was, like coming from another job. So yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
No, that was great. Elizabeth, same question. Do you feel like there's a gap between what you learned here and what you're actually doing in the real world?
I think there's pretty much no gap at all. Every day I can apply something from what I learned in the MBA program and coupling that with my experience with my roller coaster ride in the hotel industry. I will say that getting off the subject of the MBA program for a little bit, and I think Jack can attest to this, that because you wear so many hats in hospitality and it's just go, 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 constantly reacting to the next crisis, I feel like between AIG and Fox, none of them have come close to the chaos and the rigor of what I experienced in the hotel industry. So I feel like that experience alone could set you up for success anywhere, for me anywhere. But as far as the program itself, I took some of the similar classes that Ariel was talking about, business modeling with spreadsheets, the strategy and competitive advantage class, and numerous other classes just helped me think more in an analytical way, how to break down problems, you know, in a different type of way. I was actually talking to someone at work about this the other day because he was like, oh, I wonder if I should do an MBA program. And I was telling him this stuff, that it really helped me think more critically, because in the hotel industry, you're just reacting to, you're just in crisis mode all day long, whether it's the guests, whether it's a union issue or the plaza just falling apart. It's just straight up madness, unbelievable madness. I mean, just to give you a short example, at the plaza, we had like the Prince of Saudi Arabia buy out the entire hotel for $12 million. Then we had to relocate all the guests for a week. Then a union thing shut the hotel down. So it was like constantly reacting. That alone helps me with anything. But yeah, I still feel like in many ways, though, I still have to play catch up. So a lot of times, even in the job in Fox, like I'll spend a lot of time outside of work doing presentations, going into Google Slides, PowerPoint, Excel, because like I said earlier, I just didn't have those types of skills coming out of the hotel industry. So in a way, I'm still playing catch up, but that just shows you how much grit and determination I have. I pretty much had to act my way all through my interviews, not only with Deloitte, PwC, even with Fox. And I think if I were to do anything different, I wouldn't have put so much pressure on myself in the MBA program, because last semester when I was interviewing with PwC from about February to April, I literally burned myself out because I wanted the job so bad. But it happened to where even though I got the certifications in project management, I couldn't convey to them that I had experience to manage these global technology projects. And I put so much stress on myself that it was like burnout central. So hope that helps.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
terrible.
just a very determined person. And I wanted it really bad, but I'm in a good place now though. And the good part of where I'm at now is that I'm able to be in this mentorship program where I have a mentor who's like CIO of Fox Entertainment. So I can, have these one-on-ones and these group sessions and these chats. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I stayed at a place like AIG, because AIG is so hierarchical and there's so much red tape that you literally can't get anywhere. But with Fox, it's much more of like a flat structure. You can talk to someone 2 levels above you and you don't have to go through executive assistants. Like, it's a much more laid back atmosphere for me.
I mean, I love that for you. I love it for you. It sounds like you've been doing entirely too much. So I like, on the flip side, like when I guess like little crises at work happen, you're not as flustered because it's not as huge of an issue or something that you're caught too far off guard with.
Oh,
Would you say that that's
yeah, yeah. In fact, I have never experienced any crisis since I worked at the Plaza, and it's been like 2.5, since beginning of 2020. To me, just nothing compares. And for me, if I can grow up in a small town in Mississippi, have no support system, trying to be an actor and really having no future with that, and then just all of a sudden get my life into gear in the last 2 years and go pretty much from 0 to 100, I feel like anyone could do it.
so? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Adiel had to drop. She said if anyone has any questions, just to reach out to her on LinkedIn. I dropped her LinkedIn link into the comments. Amina had a question.
Sorry, really quickly. Unfortunately, I also have to drop.
Okay, so I'm gonna drop
apologize.
Jack's LinkedIn in the comments as well.
And please, everybody reach out. Happy to chat whenever. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
I'm still here.
I'm glad we have the last woman standing. So Amina, what's your question?
No, honestly, I just want to say thank you. That's because I also have to go. But I want to say thank you so much for doing this. And honestly, this have really been eye-opening. And I'm really glad you guys recorded. And I'm looking forward to rewatch it. So there's things I didn't miss. So just thank you again for sharing the panelists. And thank you, Erica, for this. Thank you so much. I just didn't want to leave just out of the way. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you joining. So does anyone have any questions for Elizabeth?
Hey, Erica. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I do have a question for Elizabeth. Hi, I'm sorry I joined late, so I'm not sure this was answered. I know that the process for transitioning or pivoting can be stressful also because of the times that you sort of hit the brick wall. Like, can you talk a little bit about how you took care of your mental health whenever maybe you answered a question wrong, or maybe you didn't know something? So like, can you talk a little bit about your resilience, I guess is the question I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I am really, really hard on myself and critical. And I kind of sometimes have this mindset to where I have to get it perfectly. And if I don't, the world is going to end. And that's kind of like one of my weaknesses in my personal life, which doesn't really spill over to the professional life. But I feel like when I was interviewing with PwC from February to April, sometimes when I felt like I didn't answer a question right, like I would literally obsess over it for like days after. And especially when I would get the rejection email and I had already been through like 2 rounds of interviews and they're like, oh, you know, you just don't have the experience or whatever they said. It was really hard for me to pick myself back up. It's a little hard to answer your question because I feel like the resiliency that I have with applying for jobs and interviewing, it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg. I've had to experience so much resiliency in my personal life that it made that job interviewing stuff a little easier to handle because of, I don't want to call them hardships, but what I had to overcome in my personal life. Like, I'll give you a quick example. Even the fact of getting furloughed in March of 2020, getting laid off in July and being unemployed for 18 months and living on unemployment and not knowing what was going to happen, that alone requires a lot of resilience. So I just kind of had it in me that, you know, I'm just going to like jump off this cliff without a parachute and hopefully I land. Like, I'm going to land somewhere. And that's the same attitude that I forced myself to take whenever I thought, oh, I messed that question up again, or I could have sold myself this way, or I could have acted my way through this better. So that's what helped me, because I've always, through life, especially over the past 10 years, it's always been like, okay, here goes nothing. You know, like I moved, even before New York, I moved to DC without knowing anybody, with no real job lined up, didn't know where I was going to live. Just so I've like applied that type of tenacity to pretty much everything in yeah, like in my life for sure.
Thank you for answering. Just a quick follow-up. Do you have a method of dealing with it? Are you like a let me go work out person, or let me watch a comfort movie? You know, how do you deal with that rejection to pick yourself back up? Do you have a method?
That's a good question. I've definitely had my share of therapy in life, but years a little while ago. But I would say anytime adversity happens or something doesn't go the way I planned, or especially with your example with interviews, it's probably going to sound really cliche, but I really like taking walks. Like during COVID with being unemployed or whatever, like I had this habit where I would walk to Astoria Park at least twice a day. Like no matter what happened during that day, if I had a success, if I had scored an interview, or even if I had a rejection, no matter what, I was going to get that walk in, that daily walk to Astoria Park. And I still do that. I still do that to this day. And I felt like getting out and doing that walk was very comforting to me, because I established that habit. And Eris wrote something here: try not to stress about things outside of your control, keep yourself inspired and out of control. That's a really good way to look at it. But I'm also the type of person to where I get a lot of anxiety. So sometimes I would have to fight not just staying in all day and like kind of punishing myself, like to be kind of like, I guess, transparent with you. So it's not easy. Even in the job that I have now, sometimes I'm super hard on myself, like, oh, I didn't do that well, or oh, I could have done this better. And I just try to do those things that I made a habit out of: walking to the park. I listen to ASMR music, which probably sounds kind of weird, but it's like music of like waterfalls and like kind of like, you know, just like relaxing music I listen to. So I hope that answers it. It's a very difficult question to answer, because mental health and stress is, people experience such a broad range of it that there's no right answer. But any habit you can develop, even for 5 or 10 minutes, I think helps.
I agree. And I don't think a walk in the park sounds cliche at all. There are some people like who enjoy baking. I think it's super important to find what works for you and something that can help soothe you during those difficult moments.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's difficult not to talk yourself out of it, like to punish yourself, because that's what I do. I'll be like, yeah, I really want to take that walk, but I don't deserve that. Like, I didn't do well, so I don't want to do that. Like, I can be that punishing to myself. So that to me is like a lifetime of working through that sometimes, and just knowing that it's not going to be perfect. There's still going to be times where you need to pick yourself back up. But I just thought, let me keep moving forward as best I can, and then never give up.
I hear that. And I think that's a very admirable quality. So I think I know the answer to this. But if you had a time machine and you could do it all over again, would you change anything about the path that you've taken in your education?
Oh yeah. I mean, if I had a time machine, I would have. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, you know, even though I said that liberal arts was a great degree and everything, if I had a time machine straight out of undergrad, I mean, going into undergrad, I would have done something like business, technology, even law, just something where there's an immediate pathway, rather than taking all the twists and turns that I did, because it took a while from undergrad to getting into grad school. I mean, that was a 10-year time bucket of me in my 20s trying to figure out what I was going to do, and being so frustrated in the hotel industry because I couldn't figure out why I was never moving anywhere, even though I was doing 100 million things a day and never getting promoted, never getting any type of advancement, being stuck. So I would have changed that, I guess, but you know, as the old saying goes, I mean, everything happens in life for a reason, and you end up where you end up. And the thing that makes me not regret my path is that I firmly believe that everything you've done in the past, you can use that experience to build into what you're doing today. You don't have to say, oh, that was a waste, or I shouldn't have done that. You can use it to your advantage to propel you to the next thing. And that's what I did. I try to focus on the next seem more of a distracting, try to do, but yeah, that's a good, David, that's a good thing to do. Try to focus on the next thing. Like, what's the next thing that you can do? Like, okay, I didn't get that interview, or I sucked at that interview, but oh, I can read this article, or oh, I can apply for the next job. I ought to show you the Excel spreadsheet that I have of these 500 jobs I applied to during COVID.
Gosh.
It was like nonstop. And for a while, I was very discouraged. I thought, oh my gosh, how, with the background I have in hotel industry, even though I'm getting an MBA, how am I ever going to get in the corporate world? And for a while, I just thought it was never going to happen. And I would get very discouraged on these types of calls where there would be a guest speaker being like, oh yeah, never give up. And, you know, this was my journey and this is what I did. And it sounded so easy. Like, I would actually get kind of mad. So I'd be like, well, I haven't gotten there yet. I'm just being honest.
No, we appreciate it. And the thing we have to sort of acknowledge, and I even like struggle with it, is everyone has a different path to success. And I think your path looks different from my path, and your path looks different from Cammie's path. Like, we're all so different. I think you just have to take the time to appreciate what your journey looks like. And girl, your journey,
Yeah, but
it's been a lot, but like, it's not a lot in a way that's just like terrible a lot. Like, I'm absolutely, I guess, like out of breath just thinking about all that you've done. You're amazing.
yeah, well, you know, it's been a journey, but I'm actually curious about other people's journey on here. And if anyone has like a question or wants to like troubleshoot through anything that they're thinking about doing. I don't know how many undergraduates are here or how many people are in the MBA program, but I mean, I'd be curious to hear what everyone else on the call is going through. But that's where you want to take it. I don't know if you have any more questions, Erica.
I have no more questions. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to hop in.
Yeah. Eris.
Hey, so
Oh,
it's
camera on.
lovely to see you here. And I know we've like talked over lunch, and I'm just so happy for you and, you know, inspired. And if I could use the word, like proud of you, you know, for all that you've done. You deserve it. I guess my question would be, because this is kind of where I am at, is I am wondering, like, how should I move forward in my new career in terms of like climbing the corporate ladder, you know, like identifying mentors, or like, how do you get ahead once you now are in, you know?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, just from where I'm at now in Fox, you know, I saw an application open for getting into a mentorship program, which gives you some visibility with senior management, and that's very helpful. But I'm probably not as good at giving advice for how to climb the corporate ladder, because it's something I frankly have not done before. And I would actually have that question too. So I feel bad that the first question out of the gate, I can't really answer it, but I feel like it so much, and people just feel free to disagree or kind of like give your insight. But I feel like so much of climbing the corporate ladder depends on what type of company that you're in. So for me, I feel like I would have a better shot climbing the corporate ladder at Fox than at a place like AIG. Because AIG is such like a rigid corporate structure with a lot of white men at the top, a lot of females who need to like overexert themselves to like maintain power and stuff. And I gotta say, a lot of that stuff just isn't me. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna, you know, be so adamant about climbing the corporate ladder as I am about just getting to maybe 1 or 2 levels above where I'm at now, and maybe that's it. I'm more interested in like a work-life balance of not working 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, kind of charting your own schedule, that sort of thing, rather than doing the other thing of climbing the ladder.
Elizabeth, I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
Because you have interviewed at so many places and have like interacted with so many kinds of companies, do you have a read on or a way to tell from the outside which companies are going to have a less hierarchical structure, which will be more open to people pivoting from less traditional backgrounds? Are there ways to tell, or questions that they ask which indicate one way or another?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I'll be honest and say that most of the time when I'm interviewing for jobs, I'm just trying to get in the door. So I feel like I've never really asked questions to lead up to getting that type of answer in the interview. That's a very good question though, and a question that should be asked. And I read a lot of that chatter on LinkedIn, but I was in survival mode for so much of my life, even up until a year ago, that it just never even occurred to me to move up the ladder because I was just trying to survive. But I feel like, you know, again, anyone feel free to chime in, but I feel like media companies, tech, maybe places like that may be more open for people to kind of shifting around. Whereas I feel like a place like Goldman Sachs, AIG, is so hierarchical and so rigid that it's not that it won't happen, but that I guess you just have to have the type of personality to survive in places like that. And I guess the only other way around that is to try to do like informational interviews with people at these companies. For me, I'm more interested in making sure that I'm a cultural fit to the company and that I'm mentally okay day to day rather than moving up. Because when I was at AIG, that really affected my mental health. And I really realized, wow, it's so important just to be in the right company, the right team, rather than even moving up. Like, I'll take that any day over just like trying to claw my way to the top. Yeah, those two questions are hard for me to answer.
Rosa.
Everyone. So to answer that question, or kind of answer that question, a good way to like search the organization and like their structure and whether or not they promote within is LinkedIn, because you can kind of see like someone's trajectory, right? Like how long they've been at a certain position. And you can kind of see if they become like a manager or if they become a senior after a certain point. And I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I was at AIG, I knew another business analyst who's been at the company, still at the company for 10 years and has never moved up from a business analyst. That tells you, that's a red flag right there. That's a really good point, Rosa.
Yeah. I'm saying that because I interviewed with Columbia University, and the position I interviewed for, I looked at the person who I was going to interview with, right? And then I looked at her supervisor as well. And for both of them, they've been with Columbia for a long time, and I was able to see like they got promoted about 3-4 times just in that span of time.
Oh, wow.
You know.
Excellent point. That's probably the best way to answer it.
Really insightful, Rosa. Shenji.
Yeah, good to have you here at this space. I just found that not just fun. I just found that you changed to AIG, then you jump again. So you are so ahead of us, and I think you just finished the PMP, right? So I mean, in your mind, how does the PMP help you find a job, and if it's useful, do you have any suggestions about how to study for the PMP? And also Shauna, I think Shauna also got her PMP a long time ago. If you girls can share it, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, PMP was really helpful. You know, the PMP, you get it through the Project Management Institute, which is like a well-recognized, world-renowned, I think it's nonprofit, but it's like a big organization. And employers value it because it tells the employer that you had the grit to study the PMP and all of that traditional project management terminology, plus sit through a 4-hour exam and answer like 200 questions. And the project management certification was helpful just so that I could get job interviews. I was just studying all of that project management terminology just to pass the exam. I don't think the material really even sunk in until like a year later. So that's how I was able to get these interviews at like EY. I think Marcia McLennan was another one. So that helped. I also feel like there's some project management classes at Baruch that are very good. Like I'm in an IT project management class now that I have to be at virtually in like 20 minutes. That's also really good because the professor, she's a program manager for CUNY, and she'll go over and screen share live project management schedule plans. She'll go through risk management. It's information technology project management with Mara Bianco. I'll write it in the chat. That being said, I still feel like, for me anyway, there's still somewhat of a gap between having knowledge of project management, agile methodologies, and what actually happens in real life. Because what happens in real life is just totally different. I mean, right now, I just got a license at work for Smartsheet, which is like a project management application that I'm just learning on the fly, to be honest. And I'm just kind of going on these projects, learning on the fly, because what the certification doesn't teach you is how to navigate the specific organization you're in, how proactive you need to be when you need to lay off, when upper management is doing a lot of the project management stuff. Like, it's a balancing act. It's good as a starting point, but then I've got about 4 or 5 project management books in my apartment right now that I'm reading. And it's one of those things to where if you study it and put the book back on the shelf, you'll lose a lot of the knowledge unless you've just been project managing for 30 years. So I'm still reading these project management books like almost every day to keep myself aware and on top of what I know.
That's
Thank you.
incredible. So since you have your class, I'd like you to get a small breather. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I'm going to drop Elizabeth's LinkedIn into the chat again, just one more time. Obviously, like, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me if you don't have access to this, or reach out to Elizabeth.
Yeah.
But again,
Thanks. It was really great. There have been like 2 key people in my life that really sat down with me and helped me. So that's why I may sound urgent over this, but it's only because like someone helped me and I realized the value of it. So anytime I can communicate that, I'll do it.
no, this was huge. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good one.